Hi, everybody. Chris here from Truly Holistic. Now, this is part two um, in regards to going through the process of a reality coaching session. And like part one, um, we're going to continue talking about, questions that I wanted more answers or more insight onto. Just like a client coming and booking that reality coaching session and wanting greater insight and answers, from a source of informational wisdom that's not bound by the limitations that a human uses from mind, thought, mentality. Everything here at Truly Holistic, it does not use any preconditional, determined ideation that is from mind, from thought, from mentality. It's all intuitive, it's all instinctual, using a completely different pathway, which is heart feel, which allows us to connect to simply what is. And when we say, which is to be present, to be self-aware of the whole, not to compartmentalize and break it down to parts, which when we look at the word compartmentalize, right, to break it down, and to use mentalize, to use mentality to break it down, which just leads us getting into losing clarity, getting confused, being essentially kept in the dark, right, in regards to not being able to gain that greater insight and understanding. A lot of the times the cause to then the effect that we experience. So that's why we want to connect to simply what is, right? Instead of running down a rabbit hole of what isn't. And this is what Truly Holistic can present to you in the reality coaching session option. Of course, we still provide insight in the clearing work of the healing sessions, because we realize that you know to have a greater level of knowing or understanding of yourself, a greater connection to yourself, but also your role in forging reality and what you're experiencing, what can be perceived as variables outside of yourself, is all part of the healing process. It's pivotal. Now we're going to explore something that is Star Wars relevant. And there was a show called The Acolyte. And in Star Wars, everyone knows about the Force, right? Right, the Force is the living force, right? The foundation of everything that's perceived in physical reality. Okay. Now, as the human, through science, we know forces such as gravity and levity. Of course, these other forces, but these are very pivotal ones. And when we look at the force, when we look at gravity and levity, it's truly holistic in their whole form. When everything's dumbed down and limited and we set from mind, thought, mentality, we see them as forces, but they're a lot more than that. For example, as I said in part one, I mentioned that what we trust in what is felt, because we know that sense of feel has no boundary or limitation applied to it. But I really rely on, and I like to go back to the original word, right? Whether it's Latin or Greek, because it simplifies it and it gives us the original meaning behind a word. And also using symbology, right? Looking at symbolism. Again, keeping things nice and simple. And generally we see the whole instead of the parts. So when we look at the Latin word for gravity, it means heaviness. Right. Now, the force that we know as that's the opposite of gravity is levity, right? And the Latin word for levity means light. And of course, people will be jumping up and down and saying, well, like a balloon, it's light, that's why it goes up. But there's a greater connection to that, because light is what's referred to as our soul consciousness, right? What we infinitely and authentically are. And again, this is my experience, right? Working on thousands of clients over the years, all around the world on all sorts of things, is when somebody is not well, right? They've got an illness, they've got a problem, they don't feel right, they feel conflicted, they've got a mental illness. We see things that come up a lot. And what that is they lose their clarity, right? They're conflicted within, they've got an internal conflict. right? They're confused. They feel overwhelmed, right? For example, I feel like the weight of the world on my shoulders. That's gravity. That's heaviness. I feel, I can't breathe. I got pressure on my chest, like a panic attack or anxiety. Or just generally not feeling well, which is a heaviness through the body we know as lethargy. Now that is gravity. So when we're more mind, thought, mentality, which is not our natural state, we will experience gravity more. Okay, we're going to get into this and this here, and how it associates to Star Wars with the Force, but also a different way that a show in Star Wars is looking at the Force in a different way that also presents a rounded approach of how we can see it and how it's connected to our experience. When we look at things like Star Wars, not looking at fictional stuff, every insight that or idea that a script writer comes up with, whether it's a book, whether it's a film, it's connected to simply what is. It's part of that infinite possibilities. The heart is aligned. Your natural state to be in the heart and facilitate your soul is invested in infinite possibilities, infinite potential, because that creates traction, momentum to grow, evolve, and ascend, right? And I get a lot of clients come to me, what they all have in common is they want change. And what we're finding when you are using what you were taught and conditioned to use, which is mind, thought, mentality, and mentality is a remanifested, repeating loop, these are not the tools that are enabling the change you want, that your heart desires. So it's going to take a change, right? In regards to your own process, right? Now, when somebody feels really good, right? So within 45 minutes, we get a client like feeling that way, right? That gravity, that heaviness, being up here in mind, thought, mentality. Within 45 minutes, and we get them back in, we open their doors of their heart and get their soul come through and facilitate their light through. All of a sudden, they're transformed in 45 minutes. All of a sudden, by the end, they have more clarity. They have more connection to themselves. They have a smile on their face, right? They feel lighter. Now that's levity. That's what the heart facilitates. That's what the soul is. And levity, to levitate, is to go up, which means to ascend. And our fulfillment is to ascend, ascension. So that's why ascension is aligned to facilitating your soul consciousness here to be represented here. Okay? So that's the difference between dark and light, in regards to Star Wars. Okay. But what we're going to get into a show Acolyte, there was this coven of witches. Right, and we'll bring up the imagery here. Right. And this coven of witches were describing the Force as a thread, the thread. Okay, and you can see on the forehead, right over her third eye, there's a spiral, right? Because our natural state of being in the flow, going with the flow, which is associated to being, right? Associated to why, as a species, we're called human beings. But the cosmic joke is we're human beings, but we don't know how to be, right? Present our natural state. Why? Because we're taught to use mind, thought, mentality, which doesn't provide our natural state. But anyway. Why I bring that up with that is because to be in the flow, what's the formal geometry of flow? A vortex. Vortex is spiral geometry. Okay, but anyway, right? So what instinctively came through is the thread was to a spider web, because a spider, to create a web, right? The substance that comes out and makes a web is a thread. That's how they describe it. Now, when I look at, and you'll find this really interesting, the human collective, the human is forged by the mind, even though as an individual, that's not our natural state, right? And this is very important to you to know, right? We are infinitely, authentically a soul consciousness. Okay, not the human. Human's an identity given by the mind, something that doesn't present a natural state. Okay. And then we become, when we are born, we become a member of a club as humanity, right? A collective of many humans. But that interconnectedness, which we call a collective of humanity, is all mind, and that's not what you are. Okay. Now, what we also know is the internet, right? And I'm using the internet to bring this video to you now. Is the internet is an internetwork, right? Interconnected, and it's a network because using mind thought mentality is a network. Just like using the heart and feel and knowing from the heart is a different network that we can connect into, right? And in fact, my soul consciousness doesn't call the body a body, it calls it an interface, and an interface is another word for a computer, right? So really, this here is a computer, and a part of our body, which is the pituitary gland, is the router, the brain, the modem that dials into that internetwork, which we call the collective, which is not a consciousness, it's a hive mind. Okay. All right. Let's bring this up. Right. So this gives you a representation of that. Right. So as you can see on the left, right, devices, that's the body, the interface. Right. Whether it's a computer, laptop, iPhone. Okay. And the route is the pituitary. Now, the pituitary gland is often called the master gland of the endocrine system. Endocrine system is all your glands and organs that create and secrete hormone. And of course, we know the importance of hormones, and especially the balance of hormones. And we know that balance is only provided when we present our natural state, which has nothing to do to connecting into a collective mind. It's the heart. That's where you come from as the soul. And the soul presents balance. The heart shifts things into balance. But when we're not in the heart, things get shifted out of balance. Do you think that causes hormonal problems? Yes, certainly do. Now, the pituitary gland, yes, it then will communicate to all those glands and organs to create, secrete hormone in an imbalanced fashion, which we get then moody, we get imbalanced emotionally, and it causes all these other health problems too, right? But it also has an influence on the nervous system, because the nervous system is the wiring of the computer. And that's how the collective extends its will into the computer, is through the wiring, through the nervous system. So this is why generally a human gets imbalanced easily through their hormones and through their nervous system. Okay? Modem, as we said, the brain, right? This is where science believes that where consciousness comes from is the brain. But they only believe that because what's interpreting it is the mind. They're using mind thought mentality to interpret what consciousness is, but that's where we get our conditioning from, not our authenticity. And of course, it's going to focus more on itself, because the brain is a fractal of what that original hive mind is. It's one big brain. We get perceived that we all have a mind. If I was to ask you what the mind looks like, you wouldn't be able to tell me, would you? But you never question it. The first 7 years of your life in becoming this identity known as a human, which is a curriculum built by the mind, is there so that for you use all of that for a lifetime over and over again, which is mentality, a repeating loop, and you never question the mind from that point onwards, even though it's not what you are. This is big. Okay. Now, the thing about the internet, right? When the internet first came out, what was it also called? The World Wide Web. This is why we need do the address bar, it's www dot, right? But it's using the word web, right? So let's bring this one up, okay? So this, again, full circle, right? Coming back to thread, and Spider uses thread to create a web, right? Now, this is the interesting thing, right? Everything sticks to a spider web except for the spider itself. Why? Because the spider created the web. Why would it create something to sabotage itself? But look at what this meme says, and you know it's true. Right? A spider never gets caught in its own web, but human sometimes many times, I would have to say, gets caught in the web of its own thoughts. Well, it's not its own thoughts, because why would you if you were the creator of those thoughts, you wouldn't get stuck to it or caught to it. Again, it just emphasizes that the mind thought mentality process ain't you. That's not what you are. It doesn't support you. For example, when you talk about mental illness, mental health, and it's only mental because the person's using mentality as their process of perceiving and processing their reality, which only the mind pathway uses. When we get in the heart, we don't use mentality. So what does mental illness show? Mental illness is a clue to show us that the tools we will use to perceive and process our reality don't support us. We get stuck, caught, trapped in our own creation, in our own thoughts. They're not our thoughts. Okay. And as I say to my clients, right, gut instinct, right? Gut instinct is a feeling, right? A feel is the domain of the heart, not the mind. The thought is the domain of the mind. And why we call it a gut instinct? Because it's there instantly. We don't need to use a process of thought to get there. It's there. It's ever present with who we are and our experience. While thought is not, it has to intervene. It always is there second, which tells me it's not directly connected to our experience, and it's not directly connected to who we are. Okay. Right. Now, we make a clearing regularly in our sessions, right, is to get one's heart open, because the majority of people haven't got their heart open because they're locked in the head, mind, thought, mentality pathway, which is how you are conditioned and taught to become, to keep you in the dark, keep you limited. Okay? So then you end up becoming the fly on the web, literally. Okay? And the intelligence that then you embody as your own, which is not the soul, is the spider on that web that created that. And you get stuck to it. If you create it, you wouldn't get stuck to it. But we do. It's a really good analogy. So anyway, let's come back to this. Just looking at my notes here. Now, when we looked at okay, so when we looked at the thread, right? So coming back to this, in this show, it mentions about the thread is how that is what connects us all together. Everything together was the word, everything. Now, the word everything is actually really interesting, okay? Because when I talk about, the origin of the human conflict is we're discerned through heart feel and also mind thought, right? So we get discernment out of thought and mentality, and we get discernment out of what we feel and what we know. And they don't align. So we're like, do I go by what I'm feeling? Do I go by what I'm thinking? Right? And that internal conflict is created from that, because we're essentially told that that is the same discernment, same intelligence, same consciousness. No, they're not. We can clearly say that here at Truly Holistic. No, you're not. It's not the same. Okay. So what the heart and the soul represents is what we call the quantum. And quantum means everything. Okay. Now the word every, meaning all, which means everything in its holistic form, whole. Right? As I said before, right? What we feel is there. It's every person connected to to our experience. That's when everything it is in its whole form. But we are taught to be thinkers. So we use mentality to compartmentalize that experience, which is to break it down into pieces, to remove it from a whole. Okay? And then we give it labels and definitions and all these sorts of things to the point that then we don't know how all the pieces come together to showcase the whole again. So it's a discernment, mind thought mentality to get us locked in the dark, keep us in the dark, literally. Okay. So when I'm going through is what connects everything together, what do they mean by everything? Because again, it depends what we're discerning it. What's the guide that's interpreting it? Are we interpreting it out of mind thought mentality? Are we interpreting it out of heart feel? Because it's going to be completely different. One wants to remain with the whole, wants to compartmentalize and break it down. Right? That's why the compartmentalize and break it down is a lack of understanding and knowing with that pathway. And this is generally the main primary pathway we get taught to use as a human, which leads to uncertainty, and we created a fear which doesn't sustain us, and it causes illness because our field of our energy and our body gets congested. Where if we stay with what is, with feeling into the situation and being in our heart, not compartmentalizing, not breaking it down, not having to give everything labels, just simply feel into it, right? We gain that understanding, that knowing. We stay in certainty. We've created a love which sustains us, which presents a state to a body where everything's good. We're not creating illness. We've got wellness and vitality there. Right? So I found that really interesting. Even the word whatever in the Bible indicated totality, right? Whole, in its whole image. Interesting. And then it also said a lack of restriction. What's that meaning? Limitation. Because through mindful mentality, by breaking everything down, compartmentalizing it, we're enabling limitation. Okay? So the opposite of everything is no thing, nothing. Okay? What does the mind represent? If the heart and the soul represent quantum, what does the mind represent? The void. Right? Coming back to, again, the light and dark situation of Star Wars, right? Because that's the darkness, is no light, nothing. Right? While the light has everything. Right? The void literally means nothingness. This is why generally humans have an inbuilt mentality of lack. What's lack? Nothingness. Because you become a representation of the void when you use mind thought mentality, because that ain't you. And then you go chasing things outside of yourself to try and fill those voids, not realizing that you already are everything, as long as you get the right avenue open, which is to get the heart open. Right? Pretty cool way. And what is ascension? Right? The spiritual process of ascension is being a representation of the whole. Everything of you that exists already inside of you. You just need to know the right avenue, because your journey is not that way. It's within. Right? To get that heart open. The mind is drawing and distracting you all out here, so you don't go that way, and you don't connect to yourself and enable everything you are to be facilitated here, which then means you have to come back for another lifetime, which we call reincarnation, which is a never-ending loop. Right, let's keep going. Now, another aspect that I guess is moving away a little bit from Star Wars, but it's more emphasizing the void, right? And how the universes look. Now, interesting, right? Uni means one, right? And verse means to create, to compose. And that's the whole reason you're here. You're here to forge and create reality, right? Quantum physics states that for reality to be here, it requires an observer. And of course, one of the primary ways that we forge and invest our energy is where we place our attention, which is using our observation. We forge and create reality, right? Now, are we forging and creating reality in the image of the heart and what the heart represents, which is the quantum, which we are? Or are we creating reality in the image of the mind and what it represents, which is the void? And this is where things such like dark energy and dark matter come into play. So let's look at that and explore that, because this is interesting stuff. So let's bring up, actually, talking about attention. You know that? My own graphic. What holds your attention holds your power because it has your energy. Because where attention goes, energy flows, which implies that where I place my attention and focus, I allow my energy to go into invest in that thing and create more of it. And not only I give it my energy to create more of it, I now create a bridge to embody its energy. And it might be something we don't want to embody. So I must ask, what is controlling where your attention goes? Because what we call the game of duality, which is to lock you into what is called the matrix of the prison world, the first step in that is to distract and draw and distract one's attention. People are so unaware that things outside of them are controlling where their attention and focus goes, which means then something else is creating your experience of reality. And it might be if you're experiencing your reality and it's got illness in it, or I'm not manifesting it, there's no financial abundance, it's really a struggle, you've got to ask what's forging that. Because does that sound like what you really desire, your heart's desires? And if it isn't, then something else is controlling that, right? It's not their heart, it's the mind. Okay? Right, let's keep going. Okay, here we go. So, right, what the universe made of? Well, first question is, what is the universe? Because the way we perceive the universe from the mind, out of thought mentality, and how we'd see it from the heart, out of feel and knowing, is completely different. From heart, feel, knowing, universe is you forging and creating reality. It's about you. From the mind, we perceive it as, that's where the origin of everything from the cosmos comes from. But did you know the word cosmos means a system of thought? It's all fabricated and perceived out of mind, thought, mentality. What's interpreting that? Okay, and you can't trust that. So anyway, let's look at this, right? So you can see the majority of the universe made of dark energy and dark matter, and then normal matter is light, 5%. That's what you are authentically. Now, this is a very much the reason you're here, right? There's a map that I'll show you. I don't have as an image on the computer, but we can do it here. This is called the Ascension Map, right? And this tree, depicted as tree, is the quantum. That's you as infinite consciousness, right? And there was once a time when there wasn't the tree. There was just celestial existence, which is the fire and ether elements down here. Now, it extended its will to create the tree for us to experience life, reality, with a purpose in its awareness. And that purpose was to mitigate and balance out the void, what the mind represents. Okay. The void was putting everything out of balance. And you're here to bring things back into balance. Doesn't that sound like Star Wars? Right. Now, as long as you're forging and creating reality from mind, thought, mentality, which is the void, you're not fulfilling the purpose you're here, because you're shifting things further out of balance. And what you experience through the body's illness is a product of that imbalance. That's what it is. Okay? Mental illness, an imbalance. Because you're not utilizing the very tool, the very way that you got here, the avenue you got here to get here, which is the heart, to shift things into balance, because that's your role, that's your purpose. Right? To create more light, to bring this into balance. Okay? So let's explore it. So when I brought forth a few things about this to my soul consciousness on the chart, this is what it had to say. Of course, we looked up some things on Google first, right? And that was dark matter, right? So it says dark matter is a hypothetical, so it's talking about theory. Science is based on theory. The only reason why then it becomes true reality is because we embody that as real, right, as a belief, and we make it real. Because what do? We create reality. That's our role. Right? If you don't like the way something's created and it's based on a theory, change it. Simple. Okay? Everything starts from a theory, and if we believe in it as it's part of our curriculum that the mind forged us to become as a human those first 7 years of life, then we'll keep continually invest our energy into making it so, making it real. Okay? So dark matter is a hypothetical form of matter. Matter means physical reality, right? Has form to it, which is the word geometry. Because everything starts from energy, and energy is formless frequencies that get converted into formed geometry, right? Matter, reality. Dark matter is a hypothetical form of matter that does not interact with light, as I say. So, as humans, we get told, oh, what we feel from the heart and thought from the mind, it's the same, it's working for the same team. Well, no, because that's light and dark, different. Okay, it does not interact with light or other electromagnetic radiation, making it invisible and undetectable by conventional means. Now, the effect we experience through our body is based on a cause, and that cause is in the unseen. It's to do with the energy and fields. Okay? Even when we're using the internet, we're using Wi-Fi, something that we don't see. So general living day to day, the cause to the effect is in the unseen anyway. Okay? This is why we need to connect into the heart, because the heart is a sense that has no boundary or limitation to it. We can connect into that through what we see and mind. No. And that's generally what we get taught to use as the human, which keeps us in the dark. Okay? It is inferred to exist based on its gravitational effects, right? As I talked about earlier at the start about gravity, on visible matter, right? So body, what we feel in the body, right? Well, I feel like the weight of the world on my shoulders. That is that. Gravitational effects on visible matter. And the structure of the universe. Well, you're the universe, right? You're forging and creating it. You're the composer and you're the one. Because the other word for your soul, what you authentically, infinitely are, is your unique energy signature, your oneness. Because as I mentioned, the human collective is not your oneness. That's not what you infinitely, authentically are. Okay? So it goes here. Dark energy becomes dark matter, right? So just like as a soul, we're formless frequencies that come here to convert that into formed creation, physical reality. So what does that mean? It means that the origin, the cause of everything is energy, not physical reality, not your physicality. Okay? Right? So matter is what is created. You create it. Okay? And that is the gravity we experience. Okay? It's felt, right? As I just mentioned. If we're creating from mind, thought, mentality, by the way. Because that heaviness is always aligned with being overwhelmed with stress. And what that never feels good. It makes you feel uneasy. Right? You're not at ease, which is to feel comforted. And it gives you that discernment. So therefore, you make better choices, not from mind, thought, mentality, but to get back in the heart and allow the heart to guide your choices, then all of a sudden you feel that lightness through the body. That makes you feel at ease, at comfort with yourself. I hope this is all connecting up. Okay. Right. So what came through on the charts was dark matter is duality. Right. Gamma duality, right, is when you are born. That curriculum and becoming a human identity, which is not what you authentically are, which is the curriculum based from the mind to embody the mind as yourself, which is not what you are. That's the void, right? To use your creative ability to create reality in an image that sustains it and evolves it, but compromises you. That's duality, okay? Now, duality is heavy. Latin word for gravity means heaviness, right? Gravity is not the structure of the universe. Mind, thought, mentality from scientists will say that, right? But again, it's an interpretation of mind. It wants you to think that. Right. Now let's go to dark energy, as it says here, 68%, right? We've just talked about dark matter, which is the byproduct of energy being converted into matter. Now, dark energy, right? This is what Google has to say. Dark energy is hypothetical, because again, everything from the mind, like I worked in the medical field for 12 years as an orthopedic and medical nurse. So I've read so many studies, and the summary of all those studies were always, we saw this, we saw that, which is observation. This might mean that, this may mean that, which shows uncertainty, because it's a lack of knowing of why we're observing it. Doesn't this become familiar? Whenever we use mind, thought, mentality, that will always be the case. Because the mind doesn't present that greater level of knowing and understanding. The heart does, because that facilitates your expansion as a soul. You need to get used to getting in the heart and allowing what you feel to provide that, not thought. Okay. Dark energy is a hypothetical form of energy that's believed to permeate, and that's a key word, we'll get to that, all of space, and is the driving force behind the accelerating expansion of the universe. As I say, depends how you perceive the universe. It is considered a mysterious component because it is invisible and not directly detectable. Well, that's the whole that's the power of the mind, because you got to realize, as I say, the mind's the void and the void is nothingness. It doesn't have what it needs to evolve itself. It needs to manipulate something that already has everything, has the power, which we do, what we authentically are. It has to manipulate us into believing we're something we're not. That's its power. It's manipulation. It's mind control. The mind is the controlling mechanism. It's not something controlling your mind. Okay. Yet it makes up a significant portion of the universe's total energy content. Why? Because humans are creating what the mind wants, which is the void, which is darkness. Okay. It's stated that it is in opposition to gravity. While dark energy is the expansion of the void, which is darkness. Right? Where gravity means heaviness, and that's our experience of a dense energy, not a light energy. Now, when it comes to the word permeate, right, which means to pervade, which means to spread through and be perceived in every part of. Now, the key word for me is perceived, because it depends. Are we using mind, thought, mentality to perceive our experience, or are we using the heart, our soul? Right? As I say, two different worlds, right? Yes, it's mysterious, because the void's power is the dark, to keep you in the dark, right? And it makes up a significant portion of the universe, because it's the driving force of creation, because humanity is mind forged. And we will never evolve as a collective, if you want to see that, as humanity, unless we shift away from the mind. This is everything. This is important. Okay. Let's have a look. So yeah, I hope you really enjoyed this and got my message through this. This is this is the beauty of reality coaching sessions, even the healing sessions. We go into the insight into because, for example, healing session, people bring forth the things they want to work on, and I call them the focuses for the session. And I see them as they've brought the pieces of the puzzle. They don't know how it all connects and what we need to do with it. That's my job. So when we go about, I have the screen in front of me. I type up their focuses they're talking about, right? And then we get into the session. As we go along with the session, the clearings that come up that my soul consciousness is guiding me to provide is I'll do those clearings, but I'll explain to my client why it's come up and how it connects to what they're experiencing through their body. So therefore, they gain a greater level of understanding and knowing of why it's there, which is due to them because they're forging and creating their experience, including all illness as well. Because greater level of understanding and knowing is healing in itself. Because if you've got a lack of knowing, a lack of understanding, the mind is forging how you apply your energy to create your experience. How's that going to make the changes or the things you want to experience as your life as what your heart desires? So the more you know reality, the more you know who you are and how you go about creating reality and your purpose in being here, you're increasing your odds and providing an experience of reality that reflects your heart's desires, everything you've ever wanted, which might include remedying a health problem. Just saying it. So if you want to book an appointment for either healing or reality coaching, go to trulyholistic.net/appointments/ and go and check it out. We also make a whole lot of products that also help to facilitate not energies that are outside of you, to facilitate more of who you are. That's because it's about you. So go and check that out, my product store at trulyholistic.net/products/. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, push the notification bell to be notified when the next video drops. Till next time, catch you later.